back to Candy's Classic Game Shrine, everyone, and today on Tinker Time DIY, I'm going to show you guys how to replace the capacitors on your Sega Game Gear. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to first disassemble your Game Gear, and for anyone who's familiar with it, you're going to remove the screws here, in the battery compartment here, here, another one in this battery compartment, and one here. On top of that, you're going to have to take a game bit, security bit, whatever you want to call it, and remove the screw that's here. Once that's finished, you're going to slowly open this up and disassemble the wires that would be attached to the top. They're just little cables that you can see here, here, and on the other side here. You just gently hold the base and yank them out. Well, not yank, but pull. So once you've separated both halves, you're going to want to take off this metal piece here and remove the screws here, 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 and here, as you can see that I've already done. After this is done, you're going to remove the metal plate, and you're going to remove the screws here, and the screws here, and I know there's another one hiding on me, and there's one hiding right there. And we're going to remove these boards as well. Okay, now that you've removed your boards, you're going to want to replace these 5 capacitors here. They're surface capacitors, so they're going to be a pain in the ass to remove, but with a bit of patience and a fine-tip soldering iron, you should be good. Now to point this out again, we're going to be removing this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. This is what your board will look like once you've removed all of the capacitors. Now that you've done that, you're going to replace the 3 larger capacitors. I've put them over here for reference. These are our old pieces. And you're going to replace them with capacitors of the same size. And these 3 capacitors will go here, obviously not in this direction, here, and here. The 2 smaller ones will be done later on. Now when you're attaching them, remember to do positive to positive and negative to negative. If you're unsure of what that is, if you look on the board, the little plus here indicates your positive side, and the other side obviously is your negative. Now in order to identify that on your capacitor, they're often labeled with a plus sign on one, and usually a stripe and a little negative sign, as you can see here, on the other side. So the side that you're looking at right now is the negative, and if you follow that leg, that would make this one, the leftmost one, as your negative. And let's carefully solder those onto the board. This, ladies and gentlemen, is your completed soundboard with the replaced capacitors. These are the 5 capacitors that we replaced. They've all been soldered to the board. And now it's time to put it back into the Game Gear case. That way we don't get it messed up. Once you have this removed, you're going to be taking out this capacitor, the one next to it, and this one right here. I'll put the information for the specific capacitors and their ratings in the description below, not just for this board, but for the other boards that we've done. Unlike the other capacitors we've been dealing with, these are not surface mounted, so a good desoldering iron is all you need to remove these babies. And here is your power board with the 3 capacitors removed. We removed C13, C11, and C5. Now we're going to be replacing them with some new capacitors. This is your completed power board. Here are the 3 capacitors that we replaced, all put in. Here's the underside. Next up, one of the most important things that you're going to have to do is look for the map of capacitors that are appropriate for your model Game Gear. Mine is the 1 ASIC model and the VA1 model. So this is the map of the capacitors. You're going to be changing C68, C43, C45, C55, C54, C47, 49, C4, C1, C11, C14, and C42. So without further ado, let's get started. I don't think I need to say this, but the interior of my Game Gear is going to look different than most. However, this is going to apply for anyone that has a Game Gear, whether it's modded or not. So you're going to remove the 8 screws along the motherboard. That way we can remove this from the console. That includes the 2 that are on either side of the cartridge port. And once that's finished, you'll be able to lift it out of the shell. This is vaguely what your board should look like after you've removed all 13 or 12 capacitors from your board. Next up, you're going to want to go and replace those capacitors with the ones that were in your kit. Here are the values, and here are the capacitors. Okay everyone, I've put the Game Gear back in its shell. All of the boards have been screwed back in place, as you can see. We have the soundboard, the power board, and the main board. All that's left to do is to reconnect these wires into the respective slots and gently close the cover. This is what your board looks like with the new capacitors. Alright everyone, this is everything reassembled and put back together. If everything is done correctly, you should have sound, no issues with your screen, and more. So let's flip it on and see. There we go, there's the sound. And now you have a perfectly working Game Gear.